So planning validation schedule continue. So also in your training, you need to schedule time for required training, including training and the schedule will assist with demonstrating to inspectors the company's attitude toward the quality of validation. Um, ensure equipment and systems to be validated will be available for validation. It may be difficult to take production equipment out of service and maximize data collection or validation activities, i.e., one production run can be used to collect data for the equipment PQ. These are some of the other things you want to factor in. Like I said, training, that's huge. So factoring training shows that you have a strong attitude towards quality. Um, make sure your equipment is in service, and this data maximizes data collection. So these are the things to consider when planning a validation schedule. So planning validation lifecycle management. So post-validation monitoring, including periodic requalification where applicable, whew, excuse me, applicable is an essential component of a VMP. So the objective is to monitor the output variables and control the input variables. So you monitoring tools such as your SPC charts, Kappa, change control, investigation reviews, and trend analysis. Monitoring a process on a per batch basis provides the lowest risk to the organization. So again, some other things to consider when again making or planning for your validation lifecycle. These are all things that need to be discussed and analyzed so that you again present the lowest risk and a robust validation program. So your site validation master plan, it must comply with all appropriate requirements in 21 CFR Part 11 to 10, Part 11 to 10 to 11. It's a top layer document and should not go into specific detail. And it governs validation activities for an entire organizational site. So again, validation master plan, high level overview, not a lot of detail. As I said earlier, just a high level overview of what you're going to validate, how you're going to validate it. It has to follow the regulations, and it governs the validation activities for the site. So going to the validation plan, it defines the scope and goals of a specific validation project. So it's a document that formally describes the method of management and execution of validation activities for a given project. The plan defines standards, specifications, scopes, and boundaries of the validation effort. The plan is typically prepared for large projects that require close management of validation activities. And for smaller projects, the scope and goals of a specific project may be defined in the validation protocol. So as you go from your validation master plan to your validation plan, you get a little bit more detail, a little bit more meat on what you're gonna do and how you're gonna execute. So it defines more so the standards, specifications, scopes, boundaries of validation. Typically prepare for large projects because you want to have close management. So it's very useful too. So you get in more detail as you go from your validation master plan to your validation plan. So here's a sample scope statement that can go in your validation plan. So the scope of the project comprises of the new 1,800-liter storage tank to be installed in Building 1. The tank is dedicated to store mineral oil only. There is no change to other equipment to the area. The tank will have a dedicated pumps and utilities, and then C drawing for facility with future tank placement. So this is a high level or example of a scope statement that you will put in your validation plan. So the validation plan should include your process system description. So systems, your drawing, summary, identification of processes the system will support. Go over processes such as sterilization or cleaning, diagrams, description, user manual, cycle parameters. They'll go over your sampling and testing plan, describe general plan, details to be included in the protocols, and it'll have your documentation such as your URS, FRS, and TRS. So this is what the validation plan should include. Also, your validation plan should include your resources, departments, and personnel participating in the project, timelines for completion, your acceptance criteria, compliance requirements, and your boundaries. So again, your validation plan is getting more into detail about how you're going to actually go through with your validation on your site. So the responsible authorities for validation. So minimum, you want to have these specific people. There'll be a reviewer approvers as you go through your validation. So your production manager, QC manager, project engineering, QA manager, validation specialist. So the production manager, their responsibility is manufacturing of batches. They review and approve the validation protocol and the final report. QC manager, their main function is analysis of samples collected. So they want to analyze the samples and make sure they meet specifications. Project engineering, they're more so over the commissioning, utilities, and engineering support. QA manager, they review and approves pre and post execution of the protocol, and they review and approve the final report. The validation manager, pre and post execution review of the protocol, review of certain report. And they're usually the validation specialist is the one that drafts the protocol and the validation report. So they're the validation specialist, so they do all the drafting. So now we're going into the validation protocol and the basics. So the validation protocol contains a detailed description of the system, equipment, process operation, including product used for interfaces, data flow, inputs, outputs. The protocol may be divided into separate tests or verifications, with each test or verification having clearly stated and defined acceptance criteria. It goes into the length and duration of the validation. It goes into shifts, operators, and equipment to be used. And it goes into identification of utilities for the process equipment. So going from your validation master plan to your validation plan, now your protocol. Now you're going into the nitty-gritty of your specific piece of equipment or your process operation. So it's now you're getting more and more detailed as you go into the protocol. So your protocol basics, you have description of the process, you have process parameters to be monitored, you have product characteristics to be monitored, you have a description of deviations detected during execution of the protocol, and you have a criteria for revalidation. So these are the protocol basics in your protocol. After you have finished your protocol and executed, now you go into your final report. So it's a separate document going over summary of what you executed in your validation protocol. So at the conclusion of the execution of the validation protocol, a final report will be prepared. The person who executed the protocol should write the final report. The final report should provide a description of the protocol that was executed and a high-level summary of the results and conclusions from the protocol, an explanation of any deviations from the protocol or deviation encountered during the execution of the protocol, an overall conclusion of the validated status of study, and their final report closes out the protocol and must be approved by the quality unit. So these are the specific details of the final report of your validation protocol. So the final report should include a summary and conclusion and must be signed, approved by the appropriate individuals. A copy of the original protocol should be attached. So that's big. So once you have your report, the copy of the original protocol approved should be attached to the report. Data should be summarized in a manner that's easy to follow, including charts, graphs, and diagrams. Process monitoring forms, analytical results, validation batches should be included, and any failures or deviation must be addressed in the final report. So again, these are the details of the final report. Big things, copy of the protocol should be attached. Any failure or deviations must be addressed in the final report. All your analytical results must be in the final report. And again, it's a high-level summary and conclusion of what you executed.